Hi everyone, in this video we are going to be making this blue rose patterned loomed bracelet with these cute scalloped edges, and this is the third project that is using this bead set that I have put together that is for sale in my Ko-fi shop, and I will put a link in the description section below as well as the comments. So as mentioned previously, I wanted to challenge myself to make as many patterns as possible from just the one set. So actually after making this third project, we will be running very low or almost out of the cobalt blue and the agate blue beads. So in the next project, I will be using the last remaining 4 bead colors, and that should wrap up this series. So yeah, with that being said, let's get started. So as usual, I will put up an image on the screen that you can take a screenshot of, or if you would like a high resolution version that you can download to your devices or print, I will include a link to my Ko-fi page for that. So if we look at this pattern, it does have a defined center. I have put a rose in the middle so that it will be very visible and sit nicely on your wrist when you wear it. So if you would like to adjust this bracelet to your desired beaded section, you need to take out an even number of rows on either side so that you can keep the rows centered. So for myself, my wrist is 5.5 inches and I want a 6-inch final size bracelet. So my beaded section will be 5 inches because 1 inch is going to be taken up by the clasp. So to get to a 5-inch beaded section, I'm going to be taking 75 rows total, and I have put a guide here on the guide sheet. And so the way that I'm going to take out the rows is by taking them off either ends. So to get started with warping the loom, I will be using my John Bead Good Thread in the color white, and the pattern is 14 rows across, which means we need to put 15 warp strands onto the loom. And because we are doing an edge, it is very important to double your first and your last strand. So to start warping the loom, the first thing I'll do is I will take some thread from the spool and I will tie a double knot over here at the top to secure this thread. Like that. And I'm going to count from the middle, and so I need 15, so I'll put 7 on one side and 8 on the other side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that is so that I can center my project on the loom. Also on this other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'll place my thread here, and I'm just going to loop around like this. And because I want to double my first strand, I'm going to put it in the same slot as that first strand that I put in. And back through the same slot and just come back around. So I'm just going to make another 14 for a total of 15 warp strands. Once you get to the middle, you want to start running your thread on the other knob to keep it even, like this. But because I don't think that I can fit this large spool into this space anymore, I'm just going to run my spool back and forth to estimate how much more thread I'm going to need. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I need another 7 to get to 15, and then add 1 to double the last strand. So I actually need 8 more. So I'm just gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I'm just going to give it a little extra and cut and keep warping. Alright, so 1, this is doubled and it counts as 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and this is also doubled, so it counts as 1. So I'm ending at the bottom, so I'm just going to wind my thread a couple times and tie a couple of knots to secure it, like this. And as you can see, these threads are kind of loose, so I'm going to do my trick of putting a Sharpie through the bottom loops to extend the thread a little bit and give it some tension. So I'm just going to use a very strong, thick sewing needle or tapestry needle, not your beading needle because that's just too flimsy. And I'm just going to stretch the thread out so that I can pop the Sharpie in there. So after doing that, the threads are a lot tighter and more taut, and now we're ready to start looming. Today's blue rose pattern uses all the colors except for gold. For our horizontal weft thread, we will still be using our John Bead Good Thread in the color white. So you're going to cut about 5 feet of thread, and you're going to, if you are right-handed, start on the leftmost strand, and if you're left-handed, you're going to start on the rightmost strand and just go in reverse. So I'm just going to leave myself a tail and tie a very simple overhand knot. So just a regular knot like this. So I'm going to place the knot about 1.5 inches to 2 inches from the edge, and here is the tail that I am leaving that I will weave in later. And you're going to place the rest of your long thread under all of your warp strands like this. And then we're going to put that longer end through a size 10 beading needle and pick up our first row of beads. So to read the pattern, you're going to go from left to right, bottom to top if you are right-handed, and you're going to go from right to left, bottom to top if you are left-handed. So here's my first row of beads, and this row is going to be different depending on where on the pattern you are starting, which is dependent on how long your beaded section is going to be. So once you pick that up, you're going to slide your beads down. And this knot is going to prevent your beads from sliding all the way out. And because these Delica beads are so much smaller than the spaces between each of the warp strands, it's going to be a lot easier if we put these Delicas in one at a time. So push the beads up with your finger, and one at a time we're going to put your needle over each of the vertical strands and through the beads like this. So this thread is running under the warp strands, and now we're going to make it go over and through each of the beads. So I'm going to put one first, and then I'm going to put the next bead in the next space and put my needle through that bead. And then I'm going to put the third bead in the third space and put my needle through that bead. And by doing this, we can fix these beads in their proper spaces and not have to worry about them anymore. We can just keep going like this. So I'm going to continue putting a bead in each of the spaces and putting my needle through, one at a time, until we get to the very end. And once you get to the end, you're going to pull your thread through. But before we can tighten up this horizontal weft thread to make the warp strand spaces fit each of the beads, we're just going to move the threads around a little bit so that they will be better able to fit the beads. For that, I'm going to take my blunt tapestry needle, which I prefer to use because it's blunt and scratches up the wood less, but you can also use any thick, strong sewing needle. Do not use your beading needle because that's just too flimsy. And I'm going to start consolidating the thread, and I'm going to put 2 in one slot. So I'm just going to lift up this thread and move it to the next slot over so that there's 2 threads in one slot. And then I'm going to take the next thread and move that to the next slot over like this. I'm putting this double strand in with this one strand because why not? And then I'm going to do the other side. So by consolidating the warp strands, as you can see, it makes it a lot easier to pull your horizontal thread to make the spaces between the warp strands better fit the beads. So now I'm going to do the other side. So now we can do the second row. So we're gonna put our needle and our thread back under the warp strands and pick up the beads for the second row. So here's my second row, and I'm going to push it up through the warp strands. And again, I'm going to put my needle over all of the vertical strands and through each of the beads. And when you do this second row, you can tighten it so that everything is nice and snug. To secure my first row and to prevent my beads from going all wonky like this, I'm going to slide a spare beading needle through the first row, and that will help to straighten it out. And also I can flush the rest of my beads down on it. And so to help maintain my alignment as I move up the pattern, what I like to do is I also like to move this needle closer to where I'm working further up, but you don't have to do that if you find that it's a hassle and your thread keeps getting caught on it. So now let's do our third row. So here's my third row, and because the spaces between the warp strands are pretty much all set, it should be a lot easier to now pop up your beads through the warp strands and thread them through like this. And so from here you can just keep working, and I'll meet you back when you run out of your weft thread and you're ready to add more thread. Alright, so I have this much thread left, so I'm going to just leave that and add more thread. So to add more thread, we're just going to do what we did in the beginning, which is I've cut about 5 or so feet more of thread, and now I'm just going to tie a knot and make sure to leave a tail with your knot of about 6 to 8 inches so that we can weave that tail in later. And I'm going to tie a regular overhand knot like that and slide it to my next spot where I'm going to add my next row, and I'm going to put my thread under all of my vertical warp strands, and I'm going to continue beading like I have done. Pick up your next row of beads, slide that down, and now you can just continue beading like you were before. So you can go ahead and pop up your beads and put your needle through all of the beads and pull your needle through and just keep going, and I'll meet you back once you finish your pattern. Alright, so I've just finished my 5-inch beaded section, and so before we proceed to doing the edges, I'm going to go ahead and tuck in all of my tails, beginning with this last one. So I'm just going to turn my loom over so that I can work from the right side. And as you can see, I still have quite a bit of thread on this last piece of thread that I put in. So I'm not going to cut it once I have finished tying it off. I'm just gonna make it exit one side on the third row so that I can continue using this thread for the edge. So to tie off, the first thing I'm going to do is remove my alignment needle. And I'm going to go back a row and come out somewhere in the middle, like there. So not going out of the last bead on the edge, but just somewhere in the middle, like that. And I'm going to go up one row and grab a thread bridge, which is the upper thread bridge. Because remember, when we are looming, we have a thread that's going under and another one going over. So I'm just going to grab one of the thread bridges from the thread that is going over in between these two beads like this. And I'm going to tie a knot. So to tie a knot, I'm just going to draw down that loop, and then I'm going to put my needle through this loop and tighten it, and that is a knot. And then I'm just going to zigzag in the opposite direction. So in tying off, we're going to be doing some zigzags and we're going to be looping back. So I'm just going to put my needle back through in the opposite direction. And again, you want to come out somewhere in the middle, like that. And pull so that you draw that knot into a bead to hide it. And then next, I'm going to go up another row and I'm going to grab another thread bridge and tie another knot. And go back in the opposite direction. Pull through, and now I'm just going to do a couple of zigzags and I'm going to loop back in and come out on the third row. So I'm going to zigzag up, and I'll do one more. This is not an exact science. And I'm going to go back down. So I'm looping back down. So I'm just looping and zigzagging around to secure this thread. And now I'm going to go into the third row and come completely out of one side. So this is one, this is two, and this is the third row. So I'm just going to come out completely of that last bead in the third row. And I'm not going to cut this thread because I'm going to use this thread to continue with doing the edging. So we're just going to be doing the same thing with these other tails, these ones and the one at the beginning. So for the middle tails, I'm going to tie off by zigzagging and looping downwards. And then I'm going to pick another tail and do my zigzags and loops and knots upwards. And so that way I can distribute these two strands across different rows of beads so I'm not overfilling a single row with two strands. If this middle knot that you made is looking a little bulky, you can also just remove that knot and just tie off your tails. That works too. Alright, so now we're going to start our brick stitch edge, and we're going to be using this long thread that we tied off in the beginning, but because it was really long we didn't cut it, and we made it go out of the bead in the third row over here. So first you're going to pick up 2 beads and you're going to slide it down, and you're going to put your needle into the thread bridge that is between the 3rd and the 4th row and hook this outside warp, because the outside warp is what we're going to be attaching the edge to. So I'm just going to pull a loop down. So here are the 2 beads that you threaded. This is the first one and this is the second one. So through the second one, through the bottom of the second one, we are going to pass our needle back through that hole. So it has to be in this orientation. So not in this orientation, but in this orientation. So going back the way you came. And when you pull, what that's going to do is it's going to sit the 2 beads next to each other like this. Alright, so this is Olivia from the future, and I realized that I forgot a step after putting on these 2 beads. I'm going to show you a clip from later on when I do the other side to show you this part. So after putting on your 2 beads, your thread is going to come out of that second bead. So you're going to go back to the first bead like this, and you're going to pull your thread through. And then afterwards, you're going to go up, back the second bead in this starting stitch for our brick stitch edging. And what this is going to do is this is just going to secure that first bead to the second bead so that the first bead won't be loosey-goosey. So our edging is going to be only this one color, this light blue agate color. And so now I'm going to formally start our edging. So now I'm going to pick up 4 beads like this, and I'm going to drop them down. And I'm going to put my needle now in the next slot. So that's this bridge between the 4th and the 5th row, like that. And I'm going to pull my thread down, and I'm going to put my needle back through only the last bead, so this last one right here in this direction. And when you pull, it's going to make a little loop. So you just want to sit this top bead like this, perpendicular to the other beads. So going in this direction, just sit that. And what's going to happen is these 2 side beads are going to become diagonal. It's going to slant like that. And then these bottom 2 beads are just going to sit next to each other, going in this horizontal direction. So the same direction as your loomed beads. So after doing 4, now we're gonna pick up 1 and go into the next slot over, which is between the 5th and the 6th. And once again, you're going to put your needle through the hole of this bead going in this direction. And when you do that, it's going to sit next to the other bead that is in the same row. After that, you're gonna pick up only 1 again. So the pattern is 4, 1, 1. So here we did 4, then this is 1, and now we're gonna do just 1. So 4, 1, 1. So after you drop down that bead, you're going to put your needle back through the next slot over. So over here, so this is between the 6th and the 7th. And you're gonna put your needle back up the bead in this direction. So now that bead is gonna sit next to the previous one. So now we've done a whole set, which is 4, 1, 1. So our next beads that we're gonna pick up is 4. So 1, 2, 3. So over here I have 4. So I'm gonna drop that down. Then I'm gonna put my needle over to the next slot, like there. And once again, I'm only going to put my needle back through the last bead, which is this one right there, the last bead. And when I pull, it's going to create another scallop loop, and you just want to make sure to sit your beads properly so that it makes a nice scallop. So this last bead is going to sit this way, the next 2 beads are going to sit diagonally at an angle, and then the bottom beads are going to sit in the same direction as the loom bracelet this way, next to each other. Like that. So this is 4. So now we're going to pick up 1. Make your needle go through the next slot. Put the needle back through that bead in this direction. Pull, and that's going to sit next to the bottom bead. And then 1, because it's 4, 1, 1. So this is the second one. So put your needle back through again. And go up the bead again this way. And that's 4, 1, 1. So again, we're going to pick up 4. Then go up. And put your needle through only the last bead, like that. And sit your beads nicely, like that. So now we're going to do 1, and then 1. So that's 4, 1, 1. So from here, you're just going to keep going, and I'll meet you back when you run out of thread and you need to put new thread. Alright, so I am running out of thread, so I'd like to add new thread. So the first thing I'm going to do is tie off this old thread. So first I'm going to back out of 1 row like this. I'm going to go back 1 row. And then I'm going to pick a row that is close to this bead. So I think I'll go through this bead and I'll just go back and tie a couple knots and do a couple zigzags and circles like this. So same as how we normally tie off our thread. So I'm going to go down this direction, and then I'm going to pick up a thread bridge. Put my needle through this loop and draw a knot. And put my needle in the opposite direction. And come out somewhere in the middle like this. And go through another thread bridge and tie another knot. So I'm gonna draw another knot and go back in the opposite direction. Come out somewhere in the middle, like that's okay. And do a couple of zigzags and loops. And cut off the thread. So to add more thread, I have put about 4 or 5 feet of thread onto a size 12 beading needle, which is a bit smaller than my regular size 10 beading needle, and that is because my rows are starting to get a bit full of thread, so I just don't want to struggle having to squeeze my needle through these beads. So we want to come out of this last bead, so we're just gonna create a path. So if I wanna come out of this bead, then I'm gonna go this way, and this way. So I'm just going to first grab a thread bridge from here. And I'm going to tie a simple knot on that thread bridge to secure this new thread. And now I'm going to go through the beads and follow the thread path that we figured out. So I'm going to pull my needle through this way. And I'm just gonna cut this tail because I don't really need it anymore. So I left a very small tiny one there, and I'm just gonna pull it into a bead to make it disappear. And I'm going to go up and I'm going to find another thread bridge and tie another knot. And go back in the opposite direction. Then I'm going to zigzag over. And just for security, I'm going to just loop around once. So I'm going to go back down one, come out somewhere in the middle, and come up again, and come out of the outside, like that. Come out of the last bead. So I've just done a loop like this, and then I've come out of the edge, and now I can put this needle through that last bead. And I can continue beading as before. So I stopped at a 4-1-1. So now I'm gonna put 4 because I am doing another set of 4-1-1s. So I've put 4 beads on my needle, and now I'm gonna go into the next space and put my needle through only the last bead like this. And make sure to sit this bead properly to form a nice little peaked loop. And since that's 4, then I'm gonna do 1, 1. So keep going, and I'll meet you when we are ready to switch over to the other side. Okay, so I'm almost done with this side of the edging, and the last bead that I want to put is a single bead between the second and the third row over here. So I'm just gonna put 1. Alright, so I've put down that 1 bead between the second and the third row. So now I'm going to make my way to the other side. So I'm going to go back 1 bead on this edge, like here. And I'm going to put my needle through the third row and come out on the other side of the third row. And I'm going to flip the loom. And between the third and the fourth row, I'm going to start my edge again by picking up 2 beads. And I'm going to put my needle through the gap between the third and the fourth row over here. And I'm only going to put my needle through the second bead, this one, in this direction. And when I pull my thread, it's going to sit the bead next to each other. So I just realized that I forgot to do this when I started the other side, so I'm just going to show it to you here. It's not totally necessary, but I personally prefer to do it because it secures that first bead better. But I'm going to actually go back through the first bead like this. And come back out on the second bead before doing my 4-1-1 pattern. So go back up the second bead in this direction, like that. Anyway, yeah, I didn't do that for this side, but it's okay. So now we can start all over again with our 4-1-1. So from here you can pick up 4 beads and make your loop. And make sure when you pull that you sit your beads nicely so that it forms a nice little peaky loop. And then so this is 4, so you're just going to do 1, 1, and then 4, 1, 1, and keep going. And I'll meet you back when we are ready to tie off everything. Alright, so I'm almost done with the other side of the edge here. And I just want to sew one last bead in between the second and the third row. And I'm stopping there because the first row is going to go into the sliding end-tube clasp. So it's going to disappear, so that's why I am stopping between the second and the third row. So I'm just going to pick up 1 bead, put my needle through the gap between the second and the third bead, and sew our last bead on. And now to tie off, I'm gonna go back to the second to the last bead. So I'm just gonna backtrack 1 bead back. And I'm gonna tie off this thread by tying a couple of knots and doing some zigzags. So I'm gonna go back down this third row. And go up and catch a thread bridge and tie a knot. And go back in the other direction. And go back again and tie another knot. Go in the other direction, and I'm just gonna loop around once. And I'm not gonna cut my thread off because I'm just going to use all of this extra thread to do my weaving. So to do my weaving, I'm just going to go over, under, over, under. So right now I'm just gonna go under, and then I'm gonna go over like this. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, like that. And when you pull, you're just gonna flush this string to the beads with your finger or a needle like this. And then going in the other direction, I'm ending on an under. So I'm gonna go over, under, over, under. So over, under, 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 over. In the opposite direction. And once again, you want to flush that thread down with some kind of needle like that. So that's our second pass. So we went right and then we went left. So now I'm gonna do two more. So we're gonna go right and left, and that's it. So that it's gonna make a small and thin weaving on this side of the bracelet before we tie the warp strands into knots. So that is good enough, and I'm just going to knot this. So I'm just gonna knot this down. And once again, a double knot. And cut this thread, leaving a little tail so that the knot doesn't come apart. So now I'm gonna do the other side. So just to secure my thread, I'm just going to go in this last row, and I'm gonna make a knot on a thread bridge. So I'm gonna pull my thread down close to the end, and I'm just going to make a knot like this, a regular overhand knot, just to secure the thread. And I'm going to pass my needle through these row of beads and exit out of the other side completely, like that. I'm just going to cut this tail because I don't really need that much tail. I just left a little bit, and pull that knot into the bead to hide it. And now I'm going to create my weaving, which is going to be the same process as the other side. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then knot it down. So after we finish the weaving, it's time to release the bracelet from the loom. So I'm just gonna take the Sharpie out and also take the knobs out. And you also want to cut the loops so that you can tie them. So now we're gonna protect our surface with a piece of plastic, and I'm going to tape down the bracelet. And I happen to have Scotch magic tape, but you can just use masking tape or painter's tape. So I'm just gonna take some E6000 PLUS glue, and I prefer E6000 PLUS because it is low odor, especially as compared to E6000, but you should still use this with adequate ventilation. It's just that this doesn't smell as bad as E6000. So I'm gonna put a small amount on the side. So I'm going to take the leftmost warp strands, which is 2 strands because we doubled it, and the next one over, and I'm going to tie a surgeon's knot. So to tie surgeon's knot, you're going to do left over right and put these tails through the loops twice, like that. And you're going to end up with something that looks very twisty like this. And what I like to do before drawing down my knot is to add a small dab of E6000 glue. And E6000 glue is very sticky and gummy, and it can get very messy. So as you can see, it has that goopy stretchiness to it. So you just want to use a very small amount and just apply very carefully. So I'm just gonna put a little dab, a very tiny dab right there along my weaving. And if you find this step tricky because you have to hold on to the knots and everything, you can just apply the glue beforehand or after. So I'm just gonna draw that first part of the knot all the way to the weaving. And because I went left over right, now I'm gonna go right over left like this and put this thread through the loop just once and draw that down. And then now I'm gonna do left over right. So I'm gonna do 3 knots for security. So this is my third one, which is left over right, and put that through once and draw that down. So the order is left over right, put it through twice, right over left, put it through once, and then left over right, put it through once. So I'm gonna do that one more time to show you. So I'm just gonna put a weight on those strings, and now I'm gonna grab the next 2. So I'm gonna grab this one and this one. So once again, a surgeon's knot is left over right, and put this through once and twice, and it'll look really twisty like this. And just a tiny dab of glue. Draw that knot down all the way to the end of the weaving. Then now I'm going to do right over left like this, and then do left over right and put it through once. So I just want to mention that because this is an even number of rows, you're going to have 3 extra strands at the very end. So instead of doing this double strand and then these last 2 strands, because it's going to be 3 like that, instead of doing these together here at the very end, I don't want a huge knot. So I'm going to do the 3 knots here instead. And that way I have 3 strands instead of the 4 that it's going to take to complete the last part. So if you remember, the last warp strand is doubled, so that's 2, and then another one, and then another one, so that will be like considered 3. So I don't want to have to tie 4 strands together like this, so that's why I'm just gonna do it right now. And this is what's gonna happen when you have an even number of rows. You just won't have enough to end up with 2 at the very last. It's gonna end up being an odd number. It's gonna end up being 3 strands. So that's why I'm just gonna take care of it here while I remember to do that. Alright, so now I'm down to my last strand, and if you will look, I have 2 left. So the rightmost warp has 2 strands, so that's considered 1, and then this is 1, so it's 2. So if I hadn't done 3 somewhere in the middle, I would end up with 3 here, and with this double strand it would end up being 4. So that's really bulky, and I wanted to avoid that if possible, so that's why I just did 3 in the middle, because as I mentioned, with 14 rows you're going to have an odd number of warp strands, so you just don't want to end up with all the bulk at the very end. Once I'm done making all the knots, what I'm going to do is grab a bit more glue and coat the weaving and the knots with even more glue. I'm going to lift the back side, and I'm also going to coat the back side. So when you're done, you can go ahead and do the other side. So once you're done knotting everything down and adding enough glue to all your knots and to your weaving, you're just gonna take off the tape and release your bracelet. And what I like to do is I like to take my loom, and you wanna make sure that you don't put your loom on top of any of the glue accidentally. And I like to lay my bracelet over the rods so that the knots and the glue will be suspended and they can just dry like this. And the glue will take 24 hours to cure, so tomorrow I'll be back to complete the bracelet. Alright, so it's been a day, so the glue has dried. So the E6000 PLUS will dry to a very strong rubbery texture. So I'm just going to trim the thread now, and I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail so as to make sure I don't accidentally cut off the knots. So for the clasp, I'm going to be using 25 millimeters. It's a little bit wider than the width of the bracelet, but because of the edges, it's not going to look imbalanced. Otherwise, a 20 millimeter is just too small. So this is a 20 millimeter, so it's not going to be able to fit that last column. So to start the finishing, I'm just going to take a plier and open up this side flap a little bit more so that it will be easier for me to insert the last row of the bracelet. I'm going to use a little bit of E6000 PLUS. And I'm going to put some E6000 PLUS onto a piece of scrap wire, and I'm going to smear some of that glue into the sliding anti-tube clasp, making sure to avoid the open slotted section so that I can add a little bit of security. And now I'm just going to very carefully slide in the last row of beads, and I'm going to use my fingernail to try to separate that last row from the second to the last row. And that's also the reason why we want to keep our weaving to a minimum, because the glue is going to create some bulk. So we don't want to make the bulk so big that we won't be able to fit everything into the sliding and tube clasp. Then I'm going to use my plier to close the flap halfway, like this. And I'm going to close it the rest of the way by tapping this on the table. And once the bracelet is closed and the glue is not yet completely set, you just want to move your bracelet towards the middle of the sliding and tube clasp so that it will look even on both sides. Since there's some extra room in there on either end, you just want to make sure that that spacing is even. Finally, to wrap things up, I will be using a split ring instead of a regular jump ring because a split ring is like a keychain coil, so there's no gaps. And I find that this sliding end tube clasp has a very thin loop that tends to come out of regular jump rings. To open up a split ring, I will be using a split ring opener tool, and I'm just going to open it up like this. And I'm going to drop down some charms that I have made in advance, and also one side of the bracelet. And I will just use a plier to twist everything. So that's done. For this side, I'm going to be dropping down a lobster clasp and also the other side of the bracelet. So now everything is attached. So this is the final result. I hope that you like it. I really enjoyed making this rose design, and I think it's super pretty. And yeah, I'm ready for the summer when all the roses come out. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial. And as I mentioned, next week is going to be the last tutorial making use of this bead set. So if you have enjoyed this series so far and would like to support my channel, please have a look at my Ko-fi shop, link in the description section below. And thank you again so very much, and I will see you again next time. Bye!